The Magnificent Battle, Merlin, Arthur's Court, and the Mistress of Time. Chapter 12, A Noise in the Woods. Even though not very happy to be in a strange place without a clue where she was, Krysta had to admit, at least we have this sun to keep us warm. You can't beat the sunshine, she said to Ashur. It feels almost like a perfect day. Receiving no response from her cousin, she repeated, "Yes, this is just about a perfect day." Krysta almost always saw the bright side of any situation. She knew perfection, even if Ashur didn't. "If we have to be lost someplace, this is nice weather to be lost in, and a pretty good place to be," said Ashur. "But I wonder where the boys are. I'm worried that maybe they got taken somewhere else. Maybe we are alone here. The sun is really nice now, but it will go down, or it could cloud up and rain, and we don't have an idea about where to spend the night." Ashur worried more about this kind of thing than Krysta, who seemed perfectly content to lie there in the grass all day. "We can worry about that later," Krysta said softly. "Right now, I'm so sleepy. The sunshine is so—" Her words trailed into silence as she slipped off into a nap. Ashur wasn't quite as content as Krysta, her cousin. She felt her mind beginning to become unsettled. Where were they? What would they do when night came? What would they do if it rained? What about food? What would they eat? Where were her cousins, the boys? Why had they become separated? How could they find each other? All these thoughts flooded her mind while Krysta dozed contentedly. Just at the point when Ashur was beginning to feel the comfort of the sun's rays making her sleepy too, she heard a loud snap coming from the forest. Her mind suddenly came back to complete attention. What could that be, she thought to herself. She strained to listen, but didn't hear anything. Her stomach growled. Her thoughts gradually returned to matters at hand, such as where to get something to eat, when she heard some crashing sounds coming from that same place in the forest. "Krysta?" Ashur said with alarm. Krysta didn't move. "Krysta!" Ashur repeated, this time shaking her shoulder. "What?" responded a slightly irritated Krysta. "Listen," Ashur said, with more than a little anxiety in her voice. "Get up and listen. There's something in the woods, and it seems to be coming this way." Krysta didn't like the interruption of her peaceful nap, but she heard the nervousness in Ashur's voice. She sat up and listened quietly. The noise that came from the forest included cracks, as if limbs were breaking, thuds, as if they were falling to the ground, and a disconcerting pattern of what seemed like footsteps coming from not so far from where they had emerged from the forest. "I told you I thought I heard something." Krysta started talking about how it could be the wind, or it could be an animal, or it could be— "Quiet," Ashur said in an emphatic whisper. "It seems to be coming this way." "Well, what is it?" asked Krysta. "I don't know," said Ashur, "but I don't like it. Do you see any place where we could go hide?" "No, I guess we could go back into the woods and climb a tree, but other than that, I don't see a thing," Krysta responded. She was beginning to share Ashur's fear. "The trees are all so big and have so few low limbs. Do you see one we could climb?" Ashur asked. "No. And the sounds of whatever this thing is are coming from behind us where the trees are, and there is an open field in front of us," fretted Krysta. The tromping, crashing sounds got louder. The girls frantically looked around for anything that would provide shelter. "Look," said Krysta, pointing to some large rocks in the corner of the rolling field. "Let's see if we can hide in them, or maybe under them." The girls ran as fast as they could toward the small rocky hillock, looking for any shelter they could find. There were some large rocks there, with a space big enough for the two of them to squeeze into. They crawled between the rocks and tried their best to hide. They lay there for a few moments. Then curiosity got the best of them, and they peeped out of the sheltered space to see what it had been that seemed to be coming from the woods. "Look," Krysta said with a start, pointing toward the spot in the woods near where they had just been. The bushes and shrubs were rustling with movement. "Oh my gosh," Ashur said. A plume of smoke emerged from the brush, then fire. What is that? What emerged from the forest was horrible beyond comprehension. It looks like something from my book of dragons, Ashur said, as a billow of smoke arose around the monster and obscured the sight of it. What is it? She asked, almost to herself. Something impossible, Krysta said. It looks like a dinosaur. Do you think we've traveled back into the time of the dinosaurs? No, Ashur replied nervously. I've studied dinosaurs for years, and it doesn't look like any I've ever seen. Once again, a puff of smoke emerged. It does look more like a, her voice trailed off into frigid silence. Like a what? Said a now irritated and frightened Krysta. Like a fire-breathing dragon, Ashur finally responded as her eyes grew 2 sizes larger than normal. It can't be a fire-breathing dragon, Krysta protested. Fire-breathing dragons have never existed. They're just imaginary. Krysta stopped short. Whatever the creature was broke out into the grassy meadow with a roar. Coming from its mouth was a burst of smoke and flame. Well, she said with frightened hesitation, maybe it can. What is that terrible noise? Ashur asked. It sounds like a bunch of hound dogs chasing after something, Krysta responded. What could be making that noise? Krysta wondered quietly. The sound seems to be coming from the dragon's stomach. The creature raised its ugly head and surveyed the meadow. Then it put its nose to the ground and ambled over to where the girls had been sleeping, sniffing the ground, snorting and looking toward the rocks. I think it smells us, Krysta fretted. Be quiet, Ashur whispered, but quietly, with great intensity. The creature, dragon, monster, or whatever it was, paused to survey the field in front of him. It didn't seem likely that he was enjoying the flowers or the sunlight, at least not to Krysta, who was beginning to quake with dread. Let's stick to dragon. The dragon sniffed the air, turning its nose toward the sky. Then he seemed to hesitate, not because he was frightened like the girls, but because he was trying to make sense of the strange smell of the trail he was following. It was sweet and floral, like nothing else he had ever smelled. Then suddenly there was a horrible noise, and a fireball flew out over the field, scorching grass and flowers and whatever else was unfortunately situated in the line of fire. I think it just sneezed, Krysta whispered to me, to Ashur. I think all these flowers are getting to its nose. Imagine that, a fire-breathing dragon with allergies, Krysta chuckled, too loudly for Ashur's comfort. Will you please be quiet and keep down? Ashur half questioned, half demanded. If he doesn't know we're here, I don't want to invite him over. Ashur loved Krysta, but Krysta had a tendency to get overly excited about things. Ashur half expected her to get excited about seeing a fire-breathing dragon. She could just imagine Krysta thinking about them being the only people from her time to actually see a fire-breathing dragon. She was just about to caution Krysta when she heard, a fire-breathing dragon, can you imagine? We may be the only people from the 21st century who have ever seen a fire-breathing dragon. This is just the most incredible thing ever, Krysta exclaimed. Ashur sighed in despair. Look, Ashur, it has a head like a snake, a leopard's body, and look at that tail, much like a lion's, and look at its feet. They look like deer's feet. What a strange-looking beast. And listen to the sound it makes. It's almost like hounds barking or howling like our old hound dog used to do. Krysta's enthusiasm, like the wind, could not be contained. The beast turned his head. He appeared to hear Krysta's excited utterances. He looked toward the rocks where the girls were hiding, or more exactly where Ashur was hiding, and Krysta was doing something like making field observations for a science report on dragons. The beast turned its serpentine head in their direction and began a slow approach toward the anxious girls. Ashur once again snapped at Krysta. Get down and be quiet. This time, however, Krysta realized that trouble was brewing. She crawled down as deeply between the rocks as possible. Sun looked down with anticipation. Storm clouds arose in the distance. Getting too much of the sun's attention in this part of the world with abundant moisture, had the effect of bringing more clouds. Sun, who had been concerned before, was fast moving to alarm. He was worried, but that was nothing compared to the fear the girls felt with every footstep of the dragon toward the rocks where they were hiding. Ashur heard Krysta whisper as quietly as possible, "I wonder what dragons eat."